Hello and welcome to Lard TV, and we're back in the room. Apologies for absence. First of all, we've been away for quite some time, not intentionally, well, partially intentionally, partially as a byproduct to the fact we've been tremendously busy working on our next set of rules, as well as some other projects such as the Far East Pacific Theatre Handbook for Chain of Command, and the almost legendary Arnhem campaign that Nick is project managing, and of course O Group with Dave Brown, which is going to be released by our sister company Riser Express. So busy times, and that has tended to mean that Lard TV has not been at the top of the pile of things to do, so apologies, but there's only one of me, and so far the cloning experiments have not gone well. Anyway, we're in a rather strange situation, of course, with the current COVID-19 coronavirus kicking around, and that means that a lot of us are in lockdown and doing things at home that we would normally do at work, or maybe even not doing things at home that we would normally do at work. So now I thought it would be a good opportunity to have a look at some of the forces involved in Infamy. A lot of questions we're getting coming through is how big are the units, how are they organised, and I thought it would be a great idea, while maybe you guys have got some time to do some painting and get your armies ready. I thought it would be great to have an introduction to all the different forces that we see within Infamy, and we're going to start today with probably one of the most popular armies, that is of course early Imperial Romans. Don't worry, we're going to be making these films looking at all the other different forces as well, but what I thought we could do is go have a look at the early Imperial Romans, have a look at the three main options for forces in the army list, and then have a look at all the supports and to really have a comprehensive look at the type of force you're going to be able to build and play with using the new rules. So, starting at the very beginning, let's talk about basic unit sizes. Infamy is a set of large skirmish rules. Now, as one finds with sharp practice, for example, we are not looking at individual figures running off and doing things on their own. This is very much a case of figures operating together in groups and then potentially forming larger formations. Now, the basic building block of any force is the infantry group. And we can have a look at one here with early Imperial Romans, which is 8 figures strong. Now you'll notice that they're in 2 ranks, four in the front rank, 4 in the rear rank. And the way we are basing is using the Sabo bases. We've got them here from war bases in MDF, which enable you to have individual figure removal, but also move troops about pretty rapidly and easily on the tabletop. Can you have multiple base figures? Yes, of course you can. Certainly, I know that Harrogate War Games Club have been very instrumental in helping develop these rules and play testing them, and who've taken them around a number of UK shows, have got their units based in 8s, and they simply keep a track of the number of dead in a group by having a red dice alongside it, suitably ghoulish in colour, to represent the number of people dead in that group. So really you can base things in any way you like, however you want. The important thing is that you can keep track of the number of men in the group and any losses. Now, there are other types of troops in the Roman army apart from Roman legionaries, and the rule tends to be that everybody is based in 8s. Here we can see a group of Roman auxilia And they are here. We've got them on these skirmishy type bases, because the great things about Roman auxiliaries, they can operate as skirmishers, or alternatively, as we can see here, they can operate in more solid line formations, which are better for fighting in close combat. If you like, possibly the best way of thinking about these guys is that they are the light infantry of the Roman period. These would tend to be allied tribes who had signed up for 26 years, 25 years, to serve with the Romans, and they would provide an awful lot of the garrison troops, such as Hadrian's Wall was predominantly garrisoned by auxiliary troops, who would be used as the policemen of the empire, so to speak. So these guys are good because they've got a little bit more flexibility in terms of mobility, not quite as well armoured, but as you can see, they operate in eights as well. Then we've got, these are auxiliary archers. Now these are regular troops, again part of the Roman army, likely in this case to come from somewhere in the east. Different regions and provinces tended to supply different types of troops. But again, being regular Roman forces, these are based in eights. That isn't universal. The Romans can have some troops who are based differently. So for example, here we can see some Balearic slingers who are not part of the regular army but are brought in as mercenaries to fight alongside them. And they therefore have a more tribal organisation of 6 figures. And again, if we have a look at allied troops who are fighting alongside the Romans but are still very much tribal troops, you can see that their warriors come in groups of 10. And we're going to look far more at the warriors when we look at the British, the Gauls, the Germans, but you'll see that they've got slightly larger groups, which gives them a little bit more resilience in combat, and they will need it when they're coming up against Romans, who are very tough indeed, as I think is rightly the case. The next thing that we see with our groups is they can often have leaders. Not always the case. In the basic army list that we're going to be looking at first here, one group of auxiliary archers have what's called a supernumerary leader, who is one of the guys in the group. We're not sure who, we're not bothered who, but we know that when they activate, they can move, they can shoot. But obviously not having a real leader means that they're not quite as good as removing things like shock. You can buy leaders for these guys as a support option, but the way they come in the basic army list here, they don't necessarily have a leader, whereas the Legion in this basic force. So let's have a look at the force that I've got here in front of me, which is a pretty standard legionary force. And this would be typical of a starting force. In fact, it's the first one listed in the rules. Let's have a look at that. So we can see our force here on the right hand side of the screen. As we've already talked about, we've got 4 groups of legionaries. They've got a centurion at the front and an optio at the back. And then off on the left, you've got a group of auxilia. Here we've got them in skirmish order, but as we've discussed, they could be formed up in the same way that the Legion are. They've got that degree of flexibility. And then to the rear, you have got the archers. You can see both of those groups are on skirmish bases, and neither of them have actually got leaders here. As we say, you can add them from the support list, but that's your basic core force. Quite a nice size force, quite achievable, 50 figures in total, and that's something to be getting your teeth into before you think about your support options. Of course, that's the core force, but you're going to be able to add to that as well. The Romans early Imperial support list is very, very comprehensive. Obviously you could add extra legionaries, you could add extra auxilia, you could add extra archers. But you can vary this. You can make some of those legionaries evocati, who are the veteran troops. You could make some of them legionary recruits, who are obviously going to be cheaper but not as well trained. You could add auxiliary slingers, as we saw when we were looking at the army list. You could add things like Praetorian Guards. I mean, the Guardsmen, that's ideal for a Roman Civil War scenario, as are the cohors urbanae, who are basically Rome's city guards, who again got involved in civil wars. You can add Marines. Roman Marines didn't have to be Roman citizens, so not necessarily the same high quality as the Legion, but pretty well equipped and ready to fight. You can add Roman cavalry, you can add allied cavalry, you can add allied noble cavalry. There are lots of options in there in terms of troops, and you can also create your own, build an army list yourself using the point system with some of those units. So for example, if you wanted to add Roman gladiators equipped as legionaries in AD 69, then that's all in there as an option for you to use it. Some of the other support options start fairly cheaply with people like the exploratores, who are going to be your scouts, who are scouting ahead of the army and checking out the terrain before you enter the battlefield to give you some hope of finding out where the enemy are rather than being surprised. You can add leaders, so specifically your auxilia. You may decide to take another unit of auxilia and a leader to give them a lot more command flexibility in there. You could take a capsaris, so the Roman army battlefield medic, named after the bag that he carried, is able to come on and influence what's happening on the game. You can also add musicians to your forces. You can add standard bearers, a valiant vexillarius who can inspire men or create a rallying point if they're falling back. Of course, you've got Roman engineers. The Romans famed for their ability to build things pretty rapidly. So having them alongside allows you to deploy things like ramparts, add ditches to your defences. They can add lilies and caltrops, as very much the Romans did when creating a defensive position. And they're ideal in certain situations where the Romans are on the defences. You could bring a young leader along out of Rome to add him to your force as a young man coming into the army from a good family to try and gain experience, and that can create a little bit more leadership with your army. So there's a lot of flexibility about how you build your force, but of course this is the first force that we're going to be looking at from our army list. There are other options as well. So let's have a look at an auxiliary force, because that can be quite interesting to game with. Okay, so here we have got a force that is part of a cohors praetoriae, in other words a foot cohort of auxilia, and they really appear quite vanilla at first look, in the way that you've just got 5 groups here, and 5 groups of auxilia and 1 group of auxiliary archers there at the back. However, as you can see, the way I've set them out, we've got 2 groups here at the front who are operating in skirmish under the command of the Optio, and then we've got 3 groups who are in a bull's head formation who are there, or a cuneus, a wedge formation as the Romans would know it, who are under the command of their centurion. And this is really quite a flexible force because of the nature of the auxilia. They are the light infantry, so they can fight in a regular formation or they can fight in a light formation. So you could mix and match and you could have them all out in a great big skirmish line beating for the enemy, if you like, or you could have them these skirmishers falling back and forming part of a more dense formation when the enemy are charging down on them. So quite a flexible formation there, and whilst not as well armoured as the Legion, they do have that ability to operate with a bit more flexibility as skirmishers. So here we've got our cohors equitata, which we're talking about a unit that the parent unit is a mixture of foot auxilia and mounted auxilia. And this again is a base force. We're looking at 3 groups of auxilia here under the command of a centurion and an optio, who again is at the back doing his job. And then we have got our group of archers here, auxiliary archers here. And then to the back you can see we've got 2 groups of 6 auxiliary cavalry serving under a decurion who is a status 2 leader. So we've got quite a lot of leadership in this force and quite a lot of flexibility again, because these guys are going to be really good coming on the table, because they've got 2 groups of cavalry coming onto the table, having already scouted some of the ground, hopefully identified where the enemy could be, and then they've got the muscle to do something about it. So quite a nice, again, very balanced force, but quite rapid and hard hitting. So there we have it. That's an introduction to the early Imperial Roman forces. As you can see, there's quite a bit of difference in there. Romans, by their nature, are far more like regular troops, but there's still that degree of freedom in there to create forces, either with the legion, the auxilia, the cavalry, and especially looking at allied troops who you're going to want to be fighting alongside you, providing local knowledge, which is tremendously useful. And the good thing about them as well is that if you happen to accidentally get them killed, it doesn't affect your force morale quite as much as the Romans getting hit. So there we go, that's a look at early Imperial Roman forces. As you can see, 3 quite different army lists. Obviously the Romans are going to be a lot more organised and more regimented and like a regular army than some of the barbarian nations are. But you can see that there is some flexibility and variety in there. It's not just a case of a monolithic legion attempting to roll over everybody in their way. And in fact, if the Romans attempt to do that, it would leave them with some weaknesses. So they are very much looking to work with the legion in tandem with the auxiliaries. The auxiliaries are a lot more flexible, and the auxiliaries can be a lot more hard-hitting in terms of their cavalry, and are really quite aggressive troops as well. So hopefully that's given you an indication of what's going to be coming for Infamy. Infamy, there's good information there about unit sizes, so you can make decisions about how you want to base your units and how you're going to get painting in order to get them ready for when the rules are published, which hopefully will be before too long. We are in a situation where obviously there are issues about publishing and sending out hard copy books at the moment. We are open for business as normal. It's perfectly easy for us with the pick-up drop-off system that we've got with our local post office to maintain the flow of normal orders. However, to launch a book where we're having to send out literally 4,000 or 5,000 copies in the post is not viable during the lockdown, and apart from that, we've already been told that the company that we use to provide all our packaging, our book boxes that we send things in, are shut down. So we're not going to be able to do the launch until we come out of the end of this coronavirus situation, or at least until we are through the main phases of it. I don't want to speculate about what's going to happen in that respect, because obviously I'm not a doctor. But you can rest assured that we're not wasting time while this is happening. We're going to be doing the layout, so we're going to be in a situation that as soon as we've all got the green light to carry on with our lives as normal, this is going to be being printed, and we're going to be letting you know as soon as that's available for advanced order, which will be, as usual, once we approved all the printers' proofs and it's going ahead. So keep your eyes out for that at some point in the future, just not yet. In the meantime, hopefully this has given you enough to be cracking on with your Infamy forces so that we're all ready to go and we can have a really big celebration when we come out the back end of this. In the meantime, you take care. Don't forget, self-isolating is really important, and keep involved on social media. Being isolated in your house doesn't mean you're isolated from the rest of the Lardy community. We're out there on social media. We're attempting to do more stuff like this to give you guys something to stop you going stir crazy looking at the wife and the cat and the budgie. But there we go. Till next time, and it won't be long because we're going to be back with more information on another force, maybe Caesarean Romans, or I thought it might be a bit fun to go and have a look at one of the barbarian nations. So let's think about that. Okay, see you soon. Cheers.